Well, I'm actually going to make a quick one. I always say that, and I never do, and today I am. I don't have much to say. I didn't do a lot of research beforehand, and it's honestly been a while since I've read this text. And when I read it, it was something I printed off, and I very poorly translated part of it. I've been trying to make my reading of Latin a little easier on myself. The way progress has been going with me in terms of Latin has not been, it's been totally jagged. And this is not entirely related, but I think it's worth making mention of. When you study an ancient or a dead language, you go through these weird phases. And the first is that you become an absolute master of the grammar. You can just identify the exact tense or declension of this particular verb or that particular noun, and the mood and the person at a level you've never been able to do with your own language or any other language. But you don't have any vocabulary. So you can recognize, based off of the inflection of a term, what part of speech it is and where exactly it fits in this huge catalog of grammar, which ancient languages, especially case-based languages like Latin and Greek have. But you don't know what the hell the word is. And then you start to just get into reading, because with Latin especially, what I care about, what most people care about, is I want to read. I want to read these things. And it becomes slow going, but you start to get some proficiency. You start to understand idioms. You're able to translate very instantaneously phrases, and it makes everything easier. But all of a sudden, because you're no longer drilling yourself on the grammar, all that stuff is gone. So beforehand, you knew, and people might have thought you were just a genius, because you could say everything about that language's grammar possible, but you couldn't read anything. And then you start reading, and you're getting more confidence, but suddenly you've forgotten all the grammar. I'm now past the second part. We'll see what happens. I don't ever see myself as a teacher of Latin, for the most part. At one point I sort of did. I'm not sure I even really wanted to. It just would make an excuse like, oh, I'm learning Latin because I teach it, as opposed to it being another additional thing I was doing, so to speak. Regardless, I don't think I'll ever really be a teacher of Latin, and in that case, I don't think I need to possess that steel trap of the grammar, but I need to get back to remembering some of the grammar, putting them together, and now really establishing a certain degree of mastery with Latin. But I bring that up because something I got recently are some orations from Cicero. I don't know, is this thing focusing? It's not. It's supposed to be. And these are, I think, almost all court cases. Court cases. And the one that I'd read previously, and I translated a bit poorly, was Pro Oroscio Amarino. This is one of his very first court cases. It's probably his most important court case, and it really paints Cicero as something like Saul Goodman when he was young. Now, a few things you should know about Roman criminal law. There's no police force, there's no district attorney. There are judges, there are courts, there are punishments. If you suspect someone of a crime, it is your duty to bring them to court to pay for the prosecution. And if you do not prove that they committed this crime, you're supposed to have a C branded on your forehead. That means calumnist. Calumny, you lied. Now, in many ways you can see why that's not a very good system. makes it very easy to get away with crimes if people are scared of you or can't afford to bring you to trial. At the same time, it could just be a matter of popular will. People hate your guts and they want you to go down. They're going to find the money and the people to accuse you of a crime and get you for it. In this case, Roscius was arrested, so to speak. Again, there's no jails per se. There might be. The jail is the entire city knowing who you are. But he is arrested, and they are charging him with the crime of murdering his own father. Which, there's really no worse crime. Patricide, there's no equality of victims. Now, even in our case, that's also not true. You know, whatever the law might legally say, and I even think the law makes distinctions. The law, I'm positive, will make a distinction between murdering a 2-year-old versus a 22-year-old. But in Roman law, there are absolutely distinctions between victims. And it's not all just, oh, the rich and the powerful are seen as better than everybody else. There's a natural hierarchy. And a son murdering a father is doing violence to the natural hierarchy. If you read enough Shakespeare, and in Shakespeare, of course, in his tragedies, family members are killing each other all the time. Fathers kill children, children kill fathers. It's all horrible things. And Shakespeare will often refer to these murders as unnatural. The idea is that families do not commit violence on one another. This goes against what God has planned in nature. Now, one of the great ironies is, of course, the city of Rome is founded upon one brother slaying another. And let's not forget that story is not unique to Rome. That's the story in Genesis of civilization. The first cities and all of the innovations we get from the first cities spring from the line of Cain. And Cain doesn't make civilization until he murders Abel. There's a point being made in those tales, something to look into. Regardless, Roscius is arrested and charged with murdering his father. Now, the basic motivation is something like, Dad either wrote him out of the will or changed his will, and so he got angry and murdered his father. Nobody wanted to defend this young man. And the reason no one wanted to defend this young man is, A, the crime itself was such a stigma. I mean, to this day in our system, you know, defense attorneys are asked all the time, how can you defend someone that's guilty? But at that time, I mean, you know, if people think you did it, then the person that's going to help you out is seen as nasty. But Cicero's young, and he gets talked into it. Part of it is, of course, sure, it's great for his reputation. If he can win this case, whoa, he's a hell of a lawyer. Part of it is, I think he looked into it and he realized this young man was innocent. But what's fascinating is the story. And I don't remember all the details. It's really complex. But essentially, this is right after the time of Sulla. Sulla was a dictator. At this time, by the way, dictators weren't necessarily good or bad. They happened all the time. Social order is breaking down, or it's war. There's some kind of emergency. And instead of having 2 councils, they change it into one dictator. Now, Sulla's dictatorship is infamous for being really extreme. And the opinion of the people at the time is interesting. Some people seem to be for it, others against it. But there was a lot of violence, proscriptions, death. It was crazy. People were being killed left and right. Now, either Sulla is still dictator, or he just finished being dictator, but the effects of his dictatorship are all over the place. And it was very common for people to find ways to engineer the death of someone they knew so they could get their property. I think what happened by this point, though, is Sulla was just out of power, and people with malicious intent wanted to try to make use of that system without Sulla being there. Now, the elder Roscius, because I believe his father had the same exact name as the son, was a very wealthy landowner. Of course, at this time, wealth is land. And this fact, I guess, was fairly well known. He probably ran afoul of some of Sulla's friends and associates, or maybe they just didn't care. I think there was probably a little bit of bad blood too. But essentially what happens is they engineer his murder, they frame his son, and by framing his son and killing the father, two things happen at once. One, even though the son was technically out of the will as far as anyone could tell, he is now completely without any rights to his father's property whatsoever. Two, now that the dad is gone and the people who helped engineer the murder are not in trouble for it, they get to divvy up his property as they see fit. Now I want to mention the thing about the will. There's a chance potentially that the will itself was forged. But, long story short, the case against the kid is not very good. It's like his alibi isn't the best. How can you really establish much of an alibi at night in Rome in the late Republic? There's not going to be a camera. There's not going to be a flock camera looking at you. And, a lot of people are drunk and crazy anyway at that time. They drink wine all day, then they keep drinking wine at night. And, okay, so he doesn't have much of an alibi potentially. He's murdered his father because he's mad at his dad. Well, even if his dad had said definitively, when I die you don't get my property, he's still alive. Like, you could change your dad's mind, or something else could happen. And plus, it seems like a lot. You're so angry with your father that you kill him, and now not only do you not get that property when he's gone, you get to suffer the worst possible punishment. And what was the punishment for murdering your father? You get stitched into a sack with a rooster, a wolf, or a dog, I think a dog, a serpent, and thrown into the Tiber. Okay, not a pleasant way to go. Now, Cicero originally didn't want to take the case. He gets talked into it. He realizes this kid is completely innocent. And what's happening is there's this pretty advanced conspiracy forming all around him, the kid in Rome, and it's involving places in the country where the property's located, which involves people buying up this property at auctions for almost no money, and they're intimidating the auctioneers. I mean, it's bad. And he has the proof. He's got the documents. He has written documents that he's found all around Rome that prove, A, the boy didn't murder his father, and B, those who murdered the father are benefiting extremely. So, I bring this up because this very interesting speech, this oration, this court case from Cicero, is one of the first examples, if not the first examples, of conspiracy theory literature. And I'm using the term conspiracy theory because it is a theory he has about conspiracy. It appears to be 100% factual and true. And to be honest, that term is really a bit of a polemic, and it shouldn't be. People conspire. If you can't totally prove it, you don't know the facts, you theorize about it. Hence a conspiracy theory. Unfortunately, we know that the term really gets its origins around the JFK assassination, and it's probably quite literally a deep state operation to get people to think they're dumb if they question it. That's a conspiracy theory. You don't want to be one of those. But of course, people have had conspiracy theories probably for all time, but this is the first time it's written. And I will say this, I do think a conspiracy theory to truly exist has to have a written component. Doesn't need the printing press, although I bet that helps. But it has to involve writing and reading, because the way you prove conspiracies is through records and documents. It's through texts. And again, if you want to be like Roland and Bart, a text is very wide. You know, the Zapruder film would be a text. But in this case, we literally have Cicero, a young Cicero, making himself known, defending this guy, winning the case. By the way, the attorneys that brought the case against the younger Roscius, they did not get the branded C, which is suspicious in and of itself. They were clearly paid off. And the people who actually murdered the elder Roscius, nothing bad happens to them. They don't get to successfully frame someone, and I do think the son gets the property back and they deal with it in some way. But they don't go to prison, they don't go to jail, they don't get thrown in the Tiber. Now, Cicero defends this young man, and I should mention how this would work. He might have not had this at the time. He was probably literally just thinking back in terms of memory, and maybe you could say, oh, I bet he made himself sound better than he was. Potentially, I don't know. But generally speaking, at some point, Cicero has enough money and cachet that he actually has a slave who, with wax tablets, made up his own version of shorthand. His slave, a lot of slaves were these brilliant Greek guys. And he would write down word for word everything that Cicero was saying in his orations. I doubt Cicero had this gentleman at this time because he was a young guy, but he had a very good memory, classically trained memory. It's weird to call it classical. That was the time, so it was contemporary memory training and ideas and rhetoric and everything. But he eventually writes his oration down later. And it probably is accurate because we know he won this case. And I'm mentioning that this is maybe the first type of conspiracy theory literature because it's about proving that a conspiracy theory exists and exonerating someone based off of that. And it's in that oration, that speech, that the phrase that you know, which is always associated with conspiracy theories, is uttered. Cui bono? To whom does it benefit? Who benefits? I'm not saying no one had ever said that in Latin before, but using that phrase that way and putting it in writing and uttering it and linking it directly to the concept of uncovering a conspiracy, and a conspiracy, of course, is always hidden. That's the point. That comes from Cicero's oration Pro Oroscio Amarino, on behalf of Roscius Amarino. I think it's Amarinus too, I don't know. It's the data for both. Anyway, I just think that's amazing. We literally have a work of literature from the ancient world that coins the phrase cui bono to mean conspiracy, and it's from the most famous lawyer of all time, probably. I know people think different things of who Cicero is, but in his time, the reason he gets fame and fortune is by being a lawyer. And so the most famous lawyer of all time, his first big breakout case is unraveling conspiracy theory. So, just interesting. The first work of conspiracy theory literature ever is Cicero's oration on behalf of Roscius Armenius. Have a wonderful whatever.